Well, hello guys, welcome back. Just getting comfy. Lovely weather we've got out here, absolutely glorious where I am. Morning cup of coffee, can't start filming without that. But welcome back to Darkstorm Rising, really glad to have you back. Enjoying putting all this work out so much. Been getting some really nice comments back, so thank you very much for all of those. It really does know I'm contributing to helping people and grow their technique as well as my own. We've started the journey with the Carnifex brood. Here we have my version of Old One Eye. I've now got all of the Carnifexes painted black and ready, but where we're going to start today is going to be working on the base. On the bases I have included aspects of wood, aspects of stone. We've also included some skulls and some barbed wire, some tree stumps. Just so we can work through a few techniques so that when you're doing your own bases you can think, oh yeah, actually I wouldn't mind adding that in myself. And it just gives some more interest to the model. Now when I did the last video, I thought in my head, I'd spoken about sphagnum moss, which is the large lumps that I've actually used for the main base. They're actually like a wood bark. Let me grab them for you. So it's sphagnum moss. I did actually put, there was somebody who said, what on earth was it I was using? I didn't really mention it very much. And I did put a feedback to them, but it's sphagnum moss. It can be bought online. You get a huge amount of it for a small amount of money. And it's spelt S-P-H-A-G-N-U-M. If I remember, I'll put that up somewhere. I may even try and keep pace with that. So sphagnum moss is like huge pieces of bark. You just can snap pieces off, shape them to your need, but they do look, when you finish with them, they do look like big lumps of rock. And then once they're treated with a bit of sand and painted black, then actually they come up really well and really set the miniatures off. So in answer to your question, that's what I was using, that's the stuff, and it's all over my desk now. And I really did make an effort because on the last video, I don't know if you noticed, but there was stuff everywhere. And I thought, I've got to tidy that up. So I've tidied the desk up, and then the first thing I do is chuck stuff all over it. So what we need to do really is get over to the table and get some painting done. Not first of all though, without a quick slurp of coffee. Oh, can't beat that first sip of coffee in the morning. And now, over to the table. Well, come on then. Okay, so we'll start by looking at the tools that we need for today. We have a couple of brushes. This one's going to be the main weapon for doing the dry brush work. And it will literally be, dry brush technique, which we'll talk about as we go through it. And then just for the more awkward parts that I might need to access, just something a little bit slimmer, but it is still quite a large brush. And then the main workhorse that we're going to have today is not going to be the wet palette, but it's going to be our dry palette, a bit of toilet paper. So we'll see how important that is in a few moments. Colours we're going to work with. We're going to start off with Rhinox hide and give the whole miniature, or the whole of the base area, a coating in Rhinox hide, and then wait for that to dry. We will then work up through Mournfang brown, and I'll just take it steady through these colours so you get a chance to write them down if that's what you're trying to do. From Mournfang we will go to Steel Legion drab. That's a very nice earthy colour, it really works well on the bases. We'll then go to Screaming Skulls for the highlights, and then just to give a little bit of texture and colour and influence on the base, we'll use Agrax Earthshade in the darker areas, and then for a little bit of colour and as hints of where we'll be putting grass later on, we'll probably use a little bit of, come on, camera, there we go. Plague Bearer Flesh. Fresh. I also may actually use, if I just reach over, a little bit of Vallejo US Dark Green. Now that's a really nice colour. for giving you that sense of jungle undergrowth. So we'll make a start, and it will be literally that I'm going to work my way around all the rock work. If I bring it up close, you can see there's some skulls in there, there's some logs, and I'm going to leave those. I'm just going to literally work around, and it will be quite a heavy coat. And when I talk about quite a heavy coat, so here's the brush, here's the miniature, and we are literally talking, quite a thorough covering, just giving the odd little bit of black here and there, just for a bit of shadow. But on the whole, everything's going to get a good hammering with the Rhinox hide. So I'll go around the miniature. I'll be back in a little while once it's had a chance to dry, and then we'll do the next coat. Okay, so we're back, and we can see that the base is still a little bit wet, but actually the majority of it is drying off. But if we paint now, what it will do is it'll mean the two colours blend a little bit together, and it'll give us a bit more of a natural look. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our dry palette, and our next colour, which is the Mornfang Brown. I've given them a good shake earlier, and we will get a lump of the paint out and pop it onto our dry palette, and then not completely dry the brush. You see that I'm actually keeping it in the wet portion of the tissue cloth. The idea is not to dry it out over here until there's very little left, is keep it moist so that actually I'm able to give a decent layer of paint that's damp enough that it will saturate into the previous layer. But what we now need to also do is concentrate on where the light is coming in. So we want our light to hit from above, and we also want it to give us and create that relief on the rocks. And you will start to see details revealed as you do this process. So like I'd forgotten, I actually put a little skull over here, but doing that has revealed him again to me. Now we will paint him individually later when we do the skull technique, but for now at least I know where he is, and I'll better find him when we come back to him. So as we come underneath the rocks, a little bit lighter with the touches. We're not trying to get quite so heavy. We do want them to be picked out. We want the eye to be able to reference the depth. So what we're doing is just putting enough paint on that you can tell that there's something going on there, and that there's changes in level and changes in texture, but we're not putting enough on that it looks like it's a foreground dominant item. And that's what we're trying to achieve. The closer we come to the front of the model, then the closer, the more paint that we put on, or the heavier we are with the brush. Now on this intermediate level, you won't really at the moment be getting a strong sense of depth. That's going to come as we do our next couple of levels, but what we will do is get a sense of relief and whereabouts the texture is going. So I think that sort of shows you this technique. I will carry on around the rest of the model. I'm not going to really change anything I'm doing apart from like just completing going around the model and just touching pieces up, so I'm happy with the depth of the colour saturation. And all that I'm going to do is try to make sure that the colour saturation is higher towards the edge of the model, near where the light is coming from, on the higher levels. Underneath, less so interested in making sure that that's occurring, but just keep dabbing away at my wet brush, keeping the brush moist so that you actually do get some deposit. I'm not trying to do a dry brush as in pure sense. It is literally getting a wet coat on that will be absorbed into the darker layer, and will make a nice blended tone. I think you can already see that that's occurring as we're working around the rest of the model, that those saturations are blending in on the rest of the model. And it doesn't matter if you overrun on the edge of the model where we're going to paint our black line later, because that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to cover that up, and that actually I don't need to really come back. That's it done. That was like what, maybe a minute of painting, nothing really lengthy there. And we don't need to wait too long to go on to our next coat, because again we want that modulation to occur, that saturation. And I will leave, let's close the lid, make sure we do that. So our next colour is going to be Steel Legion Drab, and I will actually leave the old paint on the brush, and we'll bring some Steel Legion over, and we'll bring a fair amount, and I'll shut the lid again, because I want to get a little bit of a mixture of the paint on the brush, but I do want it to maintain its Steel Legion colour. This time we're going to go in again a little bit lighter than we did before. I don't know if you can tell that I'm just dabbing away a little bit lighter, but again it's a wet brush rather than a dry brush. And it's bringing out those nice earthy tones. I really do like Steel Legion Drab. And so now we just go around with this one, picking up the high tones, less so in the recesses, yet again just a slightly higher modulation of colour. And as we come to the foreground of the model, again a slightly denser application. And you can see I'm constantly backwards and forwards between the palette and the miniature, constantly picking up paint and moving it across onto the model. Now when you're working with the model, you will actually see where you've been, and if you like just dab on a little bit too much, just blend it through, just work it in. But again, the colours at the front should be a bit brighter. And then if you hit the stuff that we're going to work on later, that doesn't really matter, because that's literally what we're going to do. We're going to work on it later. So we'll probably maybe even take it back to its original dark state, so we can now start to see that actually we're getting some nice, lovely depth to the miniature. We're getting some lovely colour modulation there. And now as we come to our lighter tone, our Screaming Skull, which again we're going to not clean the brush, we're going to apply the Screaming Skull on, and it will be a dirty a dirty Screaming Skull. I don't know if you can see that that's actually taken up some of the brown, but because it's now got the brown saturated into it, it will actually help it blend in. I'm being very light, very dabby with my technique now. I don't want a lot of deposit on here, but this Screaming Skull will actually give it that bit more of a rockiness to it. And as you can see already, it's now really starting to pick out the texture, and that's exactly what we want. And the sphagnum moss, you would not guess now that this is tree bark. This is just rock. It just is such a lovely tool to work with. Now there's things that we can, as we go around the model and you start to pick out where your reference points are and what you're looking at as you're working around the model, this is where you decide, oh yeah, I could do that there and I could do this here. So like this little ravine here, I could even maybe look at putting some resin down or some gel that would look like water. It's trapped in there, and I may do that. I may put a little bit of resin and water in there. You're starting to think about where you're going to be putting your grass, and so then you might need a bit of colour modulation to get ready for the grass. So we'll do that in the next layer, I think. So that's all done, and we're literally, this is taking like minutes. This is not a lot of work we're doing here, but the effect is looking beautiful. So on to the next bit. So now we are going to actually have to clean our brush. So I'll leave that over in the pot while I swap over. And now we're going to go on to some Agrax Earthshade, give it a good shake. And we'll move it well out of the way, and we'll put the Agrax on here, on the palette. This time the wet one. And we'll lock the lid down tight. I don't want to be get one more video on YouTube saying that I've joined the club. And underneath the edges of things that are a little bit darker, underneath where there's going to be shade, just work the Agrax in and it will just help with that tonal effect. But the paints are still quite nice and wet, so they're going to take up the Agrax, and it will end up just blending in beautifully and adding to that overall effect that we're trying to create, that realism. And we may come back to the Agrax in a little while once we've actually done some of the terrain, right? So that's looking lovely. And now we need, rather than it just being one dirgy brown colour, we need to add a bit of extra colour in there. So now we're going to swap over to Plague Bearer's Flesh, which is an absolutely amazing colour. Absolutely love the tones on this. So we'll just work it in and down in places, just run some random colours through, not on the rocks. We're trying to create the colour that where we want the grass to be placed, where we think there might be a bit of life growing, this is where that colour is headed. And if you put a bit too much on, dry your brush a little bit, take it back. Around this, I don't know if you can see, let's bring this a bit closer, but there's barbed wire in here, which we'll talk about later, but in amongst it there's quite a lot of grass. So we'll go on the grass with the Plague Bearers, get some green in there, make it look a bit swampy, a bit trench-like, and this huge beast is coming lumbering through the defences, taking them out as he goes. Alright, so yeah, we've got a little bit of colour modulation going on in there. That's lovely, and you can see as it's drying, I hope you can see the difference in the tones that it's making and the lovely effect it's giving. So later when we come to putting the grass on, that's going to look absolutely stunning. And then if we want, so if you've noticed like rocks on the offside from the sun, so sun rises in the east, sets in the west. I think it's mainly the south side actually that moss grows on, if my biology serves me well. I'm sure somebody will correct me in comments, but I'm sure it's the south side that moss grows on. So what we'll imagine is that there are, there's a damp side to this stonework. So there's a light, we'll call this the dry side. So over here we'll have little bits of green, little bits of moss growing onto the rock, just to give it a little bit more realism. Oh, sorry, drifted out of frame there, sorry about that. So we're just popping a little bit of moss on this one. You can see that there. And then just to make that the moss pop a little bit, we will go over to some, oh, excuse me, just dive through the camera. There we go. We'll go over to some lime green by Vallejo. And we'll just pick out a little bit of those mossy areas, just take the texture a little bit higher. Again onto our dry palette, just bringing the colours together. And then where the moss is, just dabbing on, picking out the highlights. Okay. Right, so this tree and this tree we're going to colour later, again with this tree here. The barbed wire we're going to colour, the skulls we're going to colour. So those will be in our next videos, but that's the base done, ready to receive all the extra artwork. And we'll also look at trying to pick out some stonework that we'll swap over to grey, although on this particular one I don't think there's a great deal to do, to be honest. So I hope you thought that was of some value. If you did, please do like and subscribe as we work our way around Old One Eye and start to get the beast ready for the battlefield. On to the rest of the base for the next videos, but I think that's us done. We just need to clean our brushes, tidy away, and get ready for our next painting session once we have done. Well, I don't know about you guys, but it's absolutely boiling here. And I've just realised that during the last section I left my fan running, essentially to stop me melting while I was painting. So please do enjoy that background noise if it is there when it comes to editing. The technique wise, I hope you liked the idea of actually using your paper towel, your kitchen roll, as a palette, and actually doing the wet blending from there. I think it gives you a much more blended, natural look than using harsh dry brushes, which sometimes can look a little bit powdery. The other thing that it also does is that once it's dry, it gives you quite a natural finish, but the highlights maybe aren't quite as poppy. So if you do let it dry and then maybe go back in with the skeleton horde with a little bit of white added, but really, really gently on the highlights, it will just pop those out and just make them look a little bit more proud for you. The idea of actually giving some weathering to the stone, getting ready for the grass going on, I hope you enjoyed all that too. But that's the base sorted out in the primary essence of things. We've now got to go back and do the skulls, do the rocks, do the stone, do the woodwork, and we'll do a little video on each of those. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. Are we painting yet? Hell yeah! And I'll catch you in the next one.